Hi, everyone. My name is Farnia Furnell. Together, we're here to deliver refreshing and insightful just-in-time workday sessions meant to set you up for greater productivity through micro-learnings. So feel free to share where you're tuning in from in the chat. And I'd also love to hear any questions or thoughts you have throughout the session. What we're going to do is we're recording now. We may stop the recording at the end, and then you can feel free to hang out and ask any additional questions should you have any. For those of you joining us for the first time, our session and this series is called Leadership COGS. And today we're talking about harvesting your resources, or you have everything you need to win. So a little backstory. After years as a Fortune 100 senior global leader in financial services and in consulting, I realized there was a gap in my understanding. I'm a first gen systems engineer trained in business. I knew process and I knew technology inside and out. Yet my difference in culture kind of caused me to struggle with the many unwritten rules that help the best leaders and the best teams to thrive. So I used what I knew. I used what I learned, and I learned what I didn't know. And I launched the Lenserf Group, and nearly 12 years later, we've helped thousands of leaders in countless teams in more than 44 countries to soar past their limitations and exceed their potential. But as I tell that story, I know that it's easy to see the end result, but it's difficult to understand how.
Yeah.
So in our Leadership COGS framework, it explains the 4 pillars that lead to progress. And that first is C for celebrating consistency. O is for establishing ownership in action. G is the glue that usually leads to growth. And S is the stretch. So our focus today is on the G, the glue that leads to growth. And I'm really excited because today we're talking to Donna Nodson, founder of Blackwood Operations and master of resourcefulness. I met Donna more than 20 years ago when we worked together at the same consulting firm. And she was amazing and totally in demand. But more importantly, she was who you wanted in your corner whenever you had like some kind of an indecision. You didn't know what you're doing, you wanted to talk to Donna. Most recently, she was an expat in Scotland, Babson MBA, Six Sigma Black Belt, operations and high trust expert with more than 25 years of helping startups through Fortune 500s. But when I think about Donna, it was a conversation with her just about 13, almost 14 years ago that led me to become an executive coach. So hi, Donna. I'm
Hi.
sharing here and have you pinned because we're going to just ask you a couple questions today. So
Okay.
welcome. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us all.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always good to chat with you,
Yeah,
Farnia, over the
yeah.
years.
So Donna, I'm just going to jump right in because there's so much that we want to get through in such a short period of time.
Hmm.
But I thought we might start our conversation back during the pandemic. I think about a period when a lot of people might have felt stuck, and it
Hmm.
was a pandemic, like, right? Lots of folks were working from home. They felt out of their
Hmm.
element. They felt uncomfortable. And I want to start here. It's a personal story, but I thought you might share because you were in Scotland, you were engaged to be married, and the wedding market was basically closed. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about what happened to you and how you thrived through the pandemic?
Yes. So, it got engaged the very beginning of 2020, before it was officially a pandemic situation. And we had waited a long time to take that next step. So I wasn't keen to then wait a long time to actually have it come to fruition. And as we attempted to make various plans, we quickly found that we were out of our depth because we didn't have the right resources. We were making plans, and no sooner had we made them than they were canceled. And I tease people that, we got married at plan, 15A, and our honeymoon was 12-3, 12F, G or G or whatever it was. We had multiple plans made and canceled. And what we realized is we needed somebody who did know what we didn't know. And so we reached out to a few different wedding planners, found one we really liked, and negotiated because it was a pandemic and we all didn't have any place to be in a hurry, and we were all trying to make things work. And so, one of the first things we did was say, look, how can we make your life better? And we talked about things like the images and marketing and being willing to give testimonials and things like that. So we gave a lot of upfront assurances that we were going to be good to help drive his business. And we needed, we were very honest and transparent about, we don't have a big budget. We don't have a lot of people that we'd have in the first instance, and we wanted something that was small but actually could take place sometime in the next year, which was on its own not a small challenge. So those were just the starting points about how we progressed that situation in a world we didn't understand all the moving parts of.
So Donna, you're talking to the amazingness and partnering with this wedding planner, and what you left out, and I thought it might be supportive, and I asked you for permission, so just in case those are wondering, I'm going to share these pictures because this is our theme: is you have what you need to win, and you were an example of that. So Donna, you not only made your own wedding dress, is that correct?
I did, yes.
But then you also sewed. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So it was the year of the pandemic, and I'm a high energy person, and I am capable of sewing. It had been a hot minute, but I wanted to sew the dresses, and I thought it would give me something to do with all my free time. So I did sew my own wedding dress, something that started out as more of a dress and ended up as a trousers and gown. And it was looking out through the resources that I had. So I know how to sew, but also then, looking to understand what can my network help me with. So there were various points I was looking for patterns that I knew what pattern I needed, but I couldn't find it. And so I'd go out and I'd check with, the people I know who were sewing on a regular basis. And there's another Facebook post going, does anybody know exactly what, size needle you use for Duchess satin? And my kids wanted to get involved. Those are our four girls, our blended and extended family. And they were all part of the wedding, and I let them choose their own designs. And if you'll forgive the slightly larger sizes, I was aiming for growing kids. So easier to have the dresses a bit bigger than too small. But, really kind of looking around and going, how can we use everything that we already have and know how to work with? And even the cake was actually designed and made by a friend of ours who works in finance. She's not a baker. She could be, but she's not. And I was concerned about, having a cake made by a bakery that was going to be subject to a closure or a shutdown or going out of business and simply not being there. And so we asked her, and she was delighted. And, so she made our wedding cake, and all those lovely fir branches you see everywhere, that's our Christmas tree, on Christmas Eve, chopped up on the table and the floors, because we'd always planned to do that, but it was supposed to be New Year's Day, and everything we had to be ready at various points for shifting. Absolutely, 100%. And that is one of the things that I've always been good at, is how to jump in the deep end of the pool and figure out how to swim, no matter what it is. I rarely jump into any situation and say, oh, right, I'm an expert, I know exactly how to do this. Who does? I think the people who jump into those situations and say they're the expert are probably the ones at the biggest disadvantage, because we can always look around and learn and figure out where our gaps are and what we need.
So I just want to shift our conversation to, you were the head of risk and compliance for a publicly traded firm. And
Yes.
your firm was doing work not only in Europe, but also in the US, specifically
Mhm.
around a new thing called high trust. Can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about high trust and how you basically became the expert at high trust?
So high trust is, I'm going to back up just a little bit. We all go to the doctor or the hospital and we have healthcare information. And some of you may have heard of HIPAA legislation, which was developed a number of years ago. And that HIPAA legislation says that we have a right to have our personal healthcare information protected. And since then, there have been a number of uh, sequential efforts following on from that to make sure that organizations, hospitals, healthcare organizations, and the firms that they work with. So the health tech, there might be a new application or a platform, a medical records provider. They all have a responsibility to protect our information and make sure that not only they're handling it appropriately, but their whole food chain, their whole supply chain is handling it appropriately. So the government, as the government does, puts in a whole bunch of rules, but they don't tell you how to get there. So high trust is actually a roadmap to say, here is how to meet the letter of the law, how to meet and exceed the letter of the law for whatever your organization is or does or looks like. And it depends on what states you're in and what, where the data is coming and going, and whether or not you're operating on an international basis. So it is at the core, it's a cybersecurity framework, but it goes pretty far beyond that because it was born out of that HIPAA legislation that said, right, we're not just going to do a cybersecurity framework, we are going to be the gold standard to not only achieve what the law says we're responsible for, but also to give people the opportunity to exceed, to protect beyond that. And they've done a really good job because as of right now, they have a published less than 1% breach rate. So anybody who operates in the cybersecurity realm can appreciate that is a really significant accomplishment. So that is a little bit about what high trust is.
So what I found most intriguing here was you didn't have an idea of what high trust was. Again, you were the head of risk and compliance, and you took on this
Right.
realm of responsibility that was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of a stretch, yet you moved back to the States and you're sitting on panels talking about high trust. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yes. So when I started working for Craneware, I didn't know what high trust was. And they were struggling to achieve it. And I stepped into a role and they said, right, so here's a bunch of stuff, and we don't even know what we're going to call this stuff yet. They called it special projects. I was in charge of special projects up front. So they gave me a bunch of stuff and they said, see what you can do with this. And I learned quickly, deep end of the pool, like I said, worked through understanding. I asked questions. I asked lots of questions. If I had to say that I was an expert in one area, that's it. I inquire, I question everything. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it should be. And if I need to understand more about what it does, then I have to get to that full explanation and the visibility on it. So I ask questions, and that's how I went through and not only formed the whole risk and compliance team and department that now exists at Craneware, but also became an expert on what high trust is because the business itself is a health tech business and they needed to have that expertise in-house to not only help them achieve the certification, but to drive it forward. So I looked down the road and said, what is the company going to want in another 2 years or 3 years? Maybe they might consider, outsourcing certain things. And how do we prepare for that in the way that we're, securing our data and get a step ahead? That way, the leadership team can make that decision whenever they want. And it was through things like that that I actually started to really get connected to the assessor firm that we worked with, and subsequently started connecting more with High Trust to get involved in case studies and that sort of thing. Because I was really, I not only enjoy High Trust, which is unusual to say the least, but I really push the boundaries and like to leverage it in a lot of positive ways. And so I think that kind of hit a really different note with folks. And I became known for that a little bit. I often say, if you don't love high trust, you're doing it wrong. And there are very few people who love high trust. So,
So I've heard of very people who even know about high trust. So
yeah,
I'll extend that there. But I wanted to shift the conversation once more, because
sure.
you took this expertise in high trust, and then you had a family state change where you all
Yeah.
moved back to the United States,
Hmm.
recently even, and you started Blackwood operations. So what I know about Blackwood Ops is you work with clients to really leverage their technology. You have this high
Hmm.
expertise, and you're supporting clients in using their technology as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you help clients leverage their existing technology?
Hmm. One of the biggest challenges that I often find clients facing is trying to figure out what platforms or solutions or products might really help them in whatever they're trying to achieve. And it's often a case of understanding, what is the basic functionality? What do you need in order to drive a project or help solve a problem? And there are so many cases where I've looked back and said, okay, let's look at the portfolio of products you already have in house. Because these days, clients, many organizations, not just my clients, but companies around the world will have a cross section of different platforms and technology that they're paying for. How often are they actually using that to the fullest extent? And how often do things get lost? And they might be paying for something that nobody's using. And those are the types of things that drive me crazy from an efficiency standpoint and a cost efficiency standpoint. I don't like to spend money that I don't have to spend. So I think that's one of the things I have in common with my clients. And really understanding where there are consistent opportunities. So one of the things that I consistently recommend to my clients is to look at SharePoint for a range of needs. And that was something that came up during my initial high trust experiences, as I worked to understand how I could organize these huge volumes of data and files, and really pushing the boundaries and saying, right, okay, I need to organize. It might be 800 controls, and those 800 controls might tie to between 5 and 10,000 pieces of evidence, and those are really big numbers, and they're really difficult to wrap your head around. So organization is absolutely critical. It's not something that can be spoken about enough when you're working with those types of really important and high volume situations.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's often like trying to sip gently through a fire hose, right? You're sitting there going, okay, I just need this to move forward, but then, you've got all these files and records and everything else. So from those early experiences, being able to solve some really fundamental issues with SharePoint, I explored a lot about what SharePoint can do. And I discovered that oftentimes people have it and they don't use it. Another client that I work with, not high trust related, a personal injury law firm. So I was brought into their client, to their organization, and they wanted some documentation done. And I got up to 150 pages and I said, right, nobody's going to read this. I said, I know you have a SharePoint site. I said, or I know you have access to SharePoint based on your Microsoft subscription. I said, so let's start there. And that was 2 years and several SharePoint sites ago. Now, each of the teams were working through to make sure they have custom SharePoint sites that can guide and coach new employees, as well as being a point of reference for existing employees on the different sources of information they have available, the systems they have, how things should get done. And all of that now flows quite easily, and they don't have to worry about it. It's a click of a button or going to a different page, and it's much more consistent across the firm because everybody's doing the same thing.
Doing the same thing. So now,
Mm,
you say doing the same thing, and I just wanted to call out another thing that that you have what you need, even in a new place. So you and your family have settled in Texas. And
Hmm.
I know is that, Blackwood is not your only company. So
It's
can you
not.
tell us what you've done to kind of bring your exported culture back stateside?
Yes. So my husband is Scottish, and we have spent 10 years living in Scotland. And if there's one thing that we've learned over the years, it's that Americans really enjoy Scotland. And there's an absolute passion. We'll talk to anybody. We'll be in an airport or a restaurant or just traveling, and people will discover that my husband is, oh, you're from Scotland? I have relatives. I've been there. I've gone to this distillery. Oh, this is my favorite whiskey or tartan, or there's just such a connection between the countries and the cultures. And you'll find a lot of the American culture is actually based on Scottish roots. So when you go way back and you're talking about barn dances, those are based on ceilidhs. And, when you're even just going through the way that they would do barn raisings and the community collaborations, that's very much rooted in Scottish culture. So we thought we'd bring a little bit of that with us. And what happens when you bring my Scottish husband to Texas? He starts wearing his boots with his kilt, his cowboy boots with his kilt, which is funny. It was very funny the first time I saw it. And then the more he did it, the more interesting commentary we had around it. So we decided we should take that forward. So in all our spare time, we are building a retail apparel brand around kilted cowboys, something our daughters actually thoroughly enjoy. And they are giving us ideas for what to put on the shirts and different designs. And we're also working with a kilt supplier to customize the kilts to hold big Texas belt buckles and those types of things. And again, some of this information I had, how to network through, how to find new suppliers, how to run a budget, and other things I've just learned as I go, because that's, you jump in the deep end of the pool and you figure out what you're doing. And, I'll say on both of the logos here, that's my husband's handiwork. He is heavy in technology as a software engineer and architect, and he's not bad as an artist either.
So one more thing, and I didn't even count this
Hmm.
one, was that again, you have what you need to win. Your husband designed this logo. So,
Hmm.
we started this segment and just asked the question, like, what do these four things have in common? And honestly, it's more than just four things, Donna. I when I say you're the master of resourcefulness, we couldn't even capture just on this call or this session how many ways that you're resourceful. But I just want to sum it up for those that have been kind enough to join us today. When you're stuck, when you're feeling the discontent that perhaps you're in a position that you can't move any further, there's an opportunity to learn and to grow there. And oftentimes we look outside and say that somewhere outside there's an answer to what I'm struggling with, and that answer is bigger than me, or maybe it's not accessible to me. In just this short period of time, in speaking to Donna Nodson, we had several examples of both personal and professional spaces where she's been able to leverage what she has to create something different. And I just want to recap that, Donna, because again, even when I was talking to you, like, Donnie, you're so resourceful. I just would love for you to share some of this with people. And you're like, wait, I don't see it. I don't see it, but it's so there. So just to recap for everyone on the line now is one, identify where in your stuckness you might be able to repurpose past skills. So Donna
Hmm.
shared with us how she learned how to sew when you were pretty young, right? Like the high school age, you knew how to
Yes.
sew, and here you are, who knew a pandemic would happen and that the wedding market would be shut down, and you sewed not only your own wedding dress, a beautiful dress, and that of your daughter, leverage resources in your home. I mean, have
Hmm.
a holiday tree and you use that as part of the decorations. It just amazing. You repurposing old skills or past skills, there's an opportunity for that. Two, your expertise is transferable.
Hmm.
So Donna worked for, again, a publicly traded firm in Scotland and was able to move uproot and move, yet experience continuity. And now starting these new user groups, I think they are for High Trust, the first user group,
Yes.
High Trust here in the United States. And
Mhm.
she's supporting that. And your expertise is transferable. So identify what you're doing now or something you might have done before that you can now use, context you might have had before that you can now use to get yourself unstuck. Number three, leveraging existing technology. So how many folks have subscriptions to technology and you're not using it the way that it's intended, or you're not using it to its full capability? If you need
Mhm.
help, Donna is on this line right now. Drop your information in the chat or reach out to her. Her contact information is on the next slide. She can support you. Blackwood Operations can support you. And number four, exporting culture. So we're in the United States, and you don't have to go too far back with any individual to see that perhaps your culture came from somewhere else, another country. And that's what's so rich about us being here at this
Yeah.
point in time, is we have that ability to do that. So where are you able to leverage something you learn, perhaps not contextually, but leverage that to the benefit of those who are currently in your ecosystem, your team, your group, whatever that happens to be? Where can you do that to benefit more? If you want to contact Donna, feel free to reach out to her on LinkedIn. Donna, if there's any other information you
Mhm.
want to share about how to contact you or purchase
Sure.
those kilts and Kilted Cowboys, no.
On my LinkedIn page, I have a facility there to schedule a meeting, so you're welcome. We've got Blackwood Ops is the website that I use for the business operations consultancy. And thank you, Farnia, for having me on today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll be back in February for another episode of Leadership COGS. If you have any questions or need help accessing resources, feel free to contact me, contact Donna. Thanks again for being here. Take care and be well.